Wow, that is a whole bunch of people dealing with a whole bunch of government, as of course these images are the ones coming from Melbourne, Australia, where people have gathered in the tens of thousands to protest yet another national security emergency totalitarian bill that will eviscerate more of their freedoms. Welcome back, extra beautiful, extra amazing human beings here to wearechange.org. We got a lot of very important information to go through, especially documenting what is happening globally right now as countries around the world from the Netherlands, Singapore, to Austria, Australia, New Zealand are moving lockstep and barrel, implementing an absolutely backwards draconian policy that some would say is almost hell-bent at trying to take away almost everything from you. We're going to get into that, plus a lot more in our new makeshift bootleg studio here in Austin, Texas. We got a lot of surprising things coming your way here. We got a lot of really fun, exciting things that you guys will just have to wait to find out more about. Now, without further ado, just jumping right into it, we wanted to remind you, especially during these extreme circumstances, that right now you could either trust the history or you could trust your government. You can't do both. As of course, I think it's fair to say that we are living in very extraordinary times, not just politically, socially, economically, but also geopolitically, as there has been recently major saber rattling by the West against Russia, with Russia saber rattling back, as of course there's major accusations of Russia amassing allegedly 100,000 troops near the Ukrainian border, as of course the United Kingdom had the outgoing head of their armed forces recently say that the UK military must be ready for war with Russia. And here in the United States, I think it's fair to say that our attention is somewhere else, as of course the media establishment is focusing and pushing an agenda on having people fight each other, with of course the ongoing proceedings in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, which we recently found out the FBI had an arsenal of new evidence surrounding, since of course they had aerial surveillance drone video that previously no one even knew about before. This as recently one of the founders of the BLM organization went on national television and just declared that riots are the voice of the unheard, as he refused to answer a question by Dan Bongino if he wanted riots, if he wanted violence. He walked off from this interview, as of course previously he said, quote, "There will be riots, there will be fire, there will be bloodshed," specifically referring if the new mayor of New York City reinstates an NYPD anti-crime unit. And while political calls for violence on one spectrum get promoted and ignored by law enforcement, the other spectrum is dealing with solitary confinement, prison guards that routinely shut off water for punishment to cellmates, while of course in some instances leaving them in large amounts of standing human sewage as they dose them with pepper spray and tear gas to an entire cell block, to the point where many of these prisoners had to be taken out of their cells on stretchers. This of course happening to many right-wingers that were heavily prosecuted by the FBI because of their involvement in the January 6th incident. And while they get punished to the highest extent they can before their trials have even started, you're left asking yourself the question, why is the FBI punishing one political group while major institutions and the establishment promote another political group and their violence? And doesn't the FBI have something better to do, especially with the huge crime waves that have hit major American cities all across this country? As of course horrendous story after horrendous story keep coming out of places like New York City, where many times criminals are allowed to just run freely. Does the FBI have more important things rather than just going after trespassers? Well, allegedly not. Now, living in a major American city is not just the most dangerous thing you have to deal with, as according to the Times of London, it's also eating bacon and eggs. Yes, the Times of London has just officially stated that there's a huge rise of heart attacks, cardiovascular disease, heart inflammation, and blood clots because of, quote, stress and poor diet. Yeah, sure. And if that's the case, we should definitely warn a Vietnamese communist leader who, of course, had an officially government-paid-for trip to London to pay respects to the grave of Karl Marx, who was also seen on Facebook later literally eating a golden steak from Salt Babe that was worth over $1,000. Yes, because nothing says I work for the people and I'm a good communist like chucking down 24-karat gold flank steak at one of the most expensive restaurants in the world. Something, of course, that not surprisingly, Facebook actually suppressed on behest of the Vietnamese government. And with that type of censorship, we are more happier than ever to, of course, have launched Uncensored.com, a platform where I provide you multiple videos in a week, all of course centered at trying to help you and also talk about the information that would get me, of course, automatically obliterated from big tech social media platforms. We also just recently gave every member of LukeUncensored.com Change Media University for free 21 additional videos about how to be a journalist, how to have an online presence, as well as a lot of extra curriculum that was just given all to you, a part of LukeUncensored.com, for free for being our members. We're also going to be giving people really incredible videos from our apocalypse survival training events that, of course, we did in New Hampshire recently. This is going to be given out in just a few days, so if you haven't signed up yet to LukeUncensored.com, make sure you do to get these 19 additional videos where you can learn about animal trapping, harvesting rapids, interrogation resistance techniques, water filtration, plus a lot more, all of course exclusively for just being a part of LukeUncensored.com. I told you I was building this platform up. It's getting absolutely ridiculous for the value you get just for signing up monthly, and I hope to see some of you guys there tomorrow when I release another video where we could actually converse ideas in more of an honest, real way, without anyone threatening to punish us for it. Now, when it comes to punishing people, I think that's been one of the overall trends, especially when it comes to the global sickness that has been going around. And of course, more importantly, the government's reaction towards it. As the same governments that have wrecked and destroyed this economy, our social, economic, political landscape, are the same ones promising to build it back under, of course, the Great Reset and Build Back Better plan, which every step of the way has absolutely tanked and destroyed this economy and your chance of having any kind of successful, happy life. Any life that, of course, is financially independent and free. How have the PR representatives of the global elites responded to this? Well, an absolute mockery to you and your intelligence, as of course the corporate press is literally running headlines talking about how inflation, the value of your dollar going down, your savings being drained, the purchasing power of the dollar being dramatically reduced is somehow a good thing? And this kind of delusion, this kind of insanity is not just spread by MSNBC, it's also by Forbes that recently wrote an article that is entitled "The Inflation Scare Doesn't Match Reality." Yeah, it's much worse, but that's not what they told their audiences. CNBC, The Washington Post, telling you to lower your expectations while, of course, denying the very reality all of us face, especially when we go to the supermarket, and telling us it's all our fault, even though the central planners and controllers orchestrated all of this as they literally print money out of thin air and give it to their friends at the big banks. And this kind of insanity has been crescendoed, I believe. I believe there's no going back from this moment where we had the IMF chief recently come out and say that if people take a specific medical procedure, that this procedure will help tame inflation somehow. How is that going to work? What's the correlation here? Well, there really isn't any. We just have one of the top globalists, the former European commissioner that's working at one of the most corrupted institutions in the entire world, the IMF, the same person that skewed data from the World Bank to help China. A corrupted, untrustworthy bureaucrat is telling you comply with government every step of the way. Do what I want you to do, which may not be right for you, which medical professionals might not advise you to take based on your own personal medical history. And she's telling the world that if people comply, inflation will go down. And this kind of thinking is absolutely insane, as of course the mandates, the lockdowns, the restrictions have led to economic chaos. It has disrupted the global supply chain, and the places that haven't followed it, haven't gone through with it, aren't only prospering economically, but they're also prospering health-wise. You look at Florida, one of the states that resisted a lot of this insanity. They're doing better than ever, especially when it comes to the actual numbers, the cases here, along with, of course, other states like Florida that have followed suit. And it's not just an American thing, it's also an international thing, as of course we have countries like Sweden that haven't dealt with 1/10 of the bullcrap that much of the world has, and their numbers and their cases are way better off, and their people are way better off. They're also way more economic prosperous than other places that, of course, complied. This, of course, is a major correlation. Correlation does not prove causation. There's a lot of different factors here that we have to entertain. But there should be a discussion, there should be a debate, and there's none of this. There's governments putting their head down, trying to push through draconian, totalitarian policies that there's no going back from, that eviscerate almost every aspect of your civil rights, your liberties, your freedoms, and your opportunities to prosper in this country. Many states are suing the Biden administration for trying to implement the policy that the IMF chief was trying to extort the world into, as of course he has his own procedure mandate that he's going to be implementing, that a court has ruled against, and even though a legal entity that overlooks these policies told him, no, you cannot implement this, the White House issued a statement telling businesses, well, you're going to have to proceed either way, even though a legal body in the United States has ruled for it to be postponed. Many states are suing the Biden administration, and of course is following suit with many other countries around the world that are setting up totalitarian policies that are wreaking havoc on their populations. Netherlands, they have procedure passports, they have mask mandates, and yet they have the highest wave of sicknesses ever that they have ever dealt with, even though they had very significant lockdowns. Compare the numbers in the Netherlands to Sweden, you see a very big comparison of what actually works and doesn't work. Singapore just announced that if people do not comply with the whims of the government, do not get the right government paperwork, do not comply with the procedure that the government wants them to take, that they're going to take away their free health care, which they have just implemented as an official discriminatory policy against the people there, even though Singapore already has some of the strictest mandates and lockdowns, and also highest compliance rates of people who have taken this procedure. And very not surprisingly to me, they're also dealing with a new wave of a lot of people getting sick. Austria just announced that this Monday they are placing people who don't get the government-approved paperwork for this procedure on lockdown, specifically targeting them, discriminating them, and denying them the basic rights to exist in society with specific discriminatory targeting policies that attack them and their personal or medical choices. New Zealand just announced a policy telling people to call the police on people if they have decided not to comply with the government in this procedure, specifically telling schools to call the police on staff that show up that haven't complied. And France also just announced a policy that has been implemented already in Israel, where people over the age of 65 get denied the ability to walk into a restaurant or a supermarket if they don't get yet a third procedure that the government wants them to do. Because, of course, it's not just one procedure that the government wants you to comply with. It's a second, it's a third, it's going to be a fourth. It's going to be a different aspect of our society that you're going to have to comply with to be able to go to the supermarket. And, of course, this never ends here. And I think the people of Australia, the people of Melbourne, absolutely realize that, as of course they are the canary in the coal mines as the government looks to take away almost every aspect of people's personal liberties and freedoms in that particular location. And I think that's why there has been such an onswell of people saying, no, enough is enough. We have human rights, we have dignity, and you cannot take away this from the general public. As already we are living through one of the greatest transfers of wealth in recorded human history. And if you think any of this has to deal with health policy, you are absolutely fooling yourself, as of course this was the excuse used to facilitate the robbing of your existence and wealth right in front of you. That is my personal opinion, because examining this, looking at it from every step of the way, the government has been making the situation that much worse. And whether it's health or the economy, expect some significant ramifications, expect some significant turmoil with those specific aspects of our lives. I've been telling my viewing audience to prepare for a very long time. The ones that have listened are definitely a lot happier, a lot less stress-filled, and of course prepared for the bigger crap storm ahead. You're welcome if you have prepared. If you haven't yet, this is definitely the time to do it, in my own personal opinion. And hey, that's just my own personal take. That's just my own personal perspective and opinion on this matter. If you think I was wrong, let me know why in the comment section below. I always appreciate your constructive criticism. I always appreciate your input. Without you, I wouldn't be here. And this is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for a lot more here on wearechange.org.